Hey, good morning, Flatiron Church. My name is Brian, lead pastor here, and I'm on location because I'm spending Father's Day with the family. We're actually in Illinois, raising some support and getting some time, some needed time with this side of the family since we don't see them for most of the year. And so we decided to record this. I wanted to make sure that I was able to speak clearly to the fathers. And fathers that are there, welcome. I'm so glad you've decided to come to church. Next week, I'll be in person. We'll continue in this series. But today, we're looking at the story of Isaac. And really what the story of Isaac is about is a story of a man who bears a lot like his father. He's got similar faith. He's going to trust in Jesus, and he's going to move forward into some dark unknowns. And yet, he also has some of the negatives too. You're going to notice that he'll do similar things as his father did that weren't always so helpful. And that got me thinking, what are the things that I tend to do like my parents or like my father? And for me, at least, there's a lot of good. There's a lot of faith and hard work, but there's also some downsides. And they really weren't apparent to me until I became a parent, and my wife helped kind of navigate and see that. And some of you guys are in the crowd saying, oh yeah, we see that. We've got that with our own spouse, the weird things they do that remind me of all the things I hate about their mom or dad. Today isn't to just poke on those, but today is really kind of invite us that, hey, what are some of the ways that we're locked into that patterns of our family, that kind of generational patterns that sometimes are a blessing, but sometimes they're sin. For me, most of the time, if I'm going to have a moment that reminds my wife of maybe the downsides of my family, it's that kind of freaking out or if you will, kind of going sideways when things lose control, and almost most acutely feel it when my kids are either hurt or have the potential to get hurt. So I'm going to share a story. My third born, Mia, when she was probably no older than, 12 to 15 months. She was walking around, toddling around, and she was a climber. She would just love to climb on things. And one time she climbed up her brother's bunk bed and got up there, was playing around and horsing around. And I would come in and I'd be like, hey, you can't be on the bed. You got to come down. And we were pretty consistent with that. But there was a time where she did it and none of us were in the room. And all of a sudden we just hear this thunk and then a pause and then loud crying. And at that point, you know, okay, this isn't just a show cry. This is, I hurt myself. She's on the ground, clearly had fallen from a great distance. And at that moment, I absolutely lost my marbles and just elevated what's going on. I'm getting louder. I'm getting more expressive. And I become a whole scene, basically. I basically melt down in that moment. And Melinda, you know, she's pretty gracious and kind of like let me have my Chernobyl moment. But later on was just like, do you ever realize that you might be adding to the problem? And initially, you know, that didn't go over so well because you're kind of thinking like, she fell down. I needed to react. She's like, yeah, but what are you actually changing in the reaction? And as I sat and thought about it, it began to hit me. I'm not changing anything. In fact, I'm probably just making things worse. And I began to see that I had a pattern of that. That I had a pattern when something hit and something was really, you know, out of control and I would elevate. Rather than making the situation better, I was just running to fear rather than faith. I was running to this kind of just, I'm going to get loud even though nothing's changing. Can you relate? I mean, some of you guys in here, that's like exactly what you do. Some of you, that's not your sin. You have other sins that kind of follow or mimic the patterns of your family. But here's my thought. Each of us are going to come in shaped by our parents in ways that are helpful and not. Here's a big idea. Faith will always look foolish to the fearful. When you find yourself in those moments where fear's gripping and it's having its way in your heart, the path of faith is always going to seem foolish. Like to me, when she fell, I was like, no, I need to get loud. I need to get crazy. I need to make sure that this never happens again. Rather than just trusting by faith, the Lord is going to protect and take care, and I can move calmly into the situation. Where are you at today? Where are you at today where to choose the path of faith seems foolish? We're going to go ahead and turn now and look at Isaac, because you're going to see in him kind of a similar scenario play out, where he has the strengths of his father, but also some of the downsides. We're picking up chapter 26, verse 1, begins this way. Now there was a famine in the land, beside the former famine that was in the days of Abraham. It's like every generation you've got hardships that you have to walk through. And Isaac went to Gerar to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. And the Lord appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring of all these lands. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, my laws. Okay, setting up the scene, this is what tends to happen. His father, Abraham, wonderful man, first patriarch of Israel. It's literally the promise of Israel came into his line. And when God showed up and said, hey, leave the land of Ur and follow me. And he did. Isaac is the next one here. And dad's no longer in the picture. You're going to notice that, hey, where's Abraham in this story? Abraham's passed. That guiding light, that kind of rock for Isaac is no longer there. He's unmoored. He's now having to move in faith. He's now having to trust the Lord and let it be his own walk. And right as that happens, famine hits. Now, what is a famine? It's a lack of resources that can kill you. If you don't fix that situation out, your flocks will die. If you don't fix that situation out, eventually your family can die as well. It's a real danger, and it's crouching at the door. And this is what always happens. We lose our guiding rock, somebody that we were looking up to. The thing that was helping us move forward all of a sudden goes away or becomes dim. And now an issue comes that we can't handle. It's over us, but it's all encompassing. And in that moment, God meets us and he calls us to faith. What does he say to Isaac here? He says, do not go down to Egypt, but dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. So the first thing he says is, hey, you see that really green, fertile area right next to the Nile that's got food? Yeah, don't go there. And then he says, go to a land that I'm going to tell you. He doesn't even tell him the roadmap. He just says, don't go there, which makes sense. I just want you to follow me. And then the second thing we see in that is that following is to an unseen location, an unspecified location. I'm going to need you to walk by faith. The third thing we're noticing is that he's reminding Isaac of the covenant he has with his father. He says, I will continue to establish that covenant with you as you walk by faith. So that sets up the scene. Some of you guys, that's exactly what brought you here today on Father's Day. You're in that journey right now. The guiding light has been dimmed. The situation is chaotic. Something's erupted. God's meeting you today in his word with his promise, and he's asking you to trust by faith. And what do? Verse 6, it says, Isaac settled in Gerar. He didn't go down to Egypt. Verse 7, and when the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, she is my sister, for he feared to say, my wife, thinking lest the men of the place should kill me because of Rebekah, because she was attractive in appearance. Now, hopefully you didn't miss this. Abraham did the exact same thing with his wife years earlier. In fact, he did it twice. And this is one of those areas where Isaac, he's got faith. He goes to Gerar. He's heading to the land as he needs to, but he's also picking up some of those behaviors that are less than helpful. He's fearful. Hey, if I do this, they may kill me. And you're thinking, what's going on here? Why would they kill him? You got a beautiful lady. If he says, I'm her husband, and they want to marry her, and he's in the way, guess what happens to him? He gets cut. So he's thinking, hey, if I just say she's my sister, I can still be in the role of protector, but I'm not going to lose my life. It's a cowardice way of dealing with issues. But this, honestly, this is how we tend to deal with things. We get these strengths from our family. We get these strengths from our parents. But we also get weaknesses. Like in that moment when I'm freaking out with my daughter, Mia, what was happening is I'm elevating the emotion, right? I've seen that done before. I've seen strong emotion when stuff's going chaotic, but it's not helpful. It's actually causing its own injuries. So continuing on, let's see how this unfolds. When he had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out the window, and he saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah, his wife. And so Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, she's your wife. How then could you say she's my sister? And Isaac said to him, because I thought lest I die because of her. And so Abimelech said, what is this you've done to us? One of the people might have easily lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, whoever touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Okay, what's happening here? Fear. And a lot of it. We already just looked at how Isaac followed faith from his father, but he also had his own fears from his father too. There's 3 types of fears we're seeing here. The first one is an irrational fear. What do I mean by irrational fear? Well, it says in verse 8, he had been there a long time. The fear that he had is that as he walked into this land, and since she was so beautiful in appearance, that all the guys would be vying to kill him because they'd want to be with her. Now, she was beautiful. We have no indication that she wasn't, but he was there for a long time. Not days or weeks or months. We're likely talking years over the course, and you're going to see how that story unfolds. It is years. And no one's giving him issue for it. He had an irrational fear of walking into that region and thinking this could happen, and therefore I'm going to lie about the status of my bride. And we do that too. I have an irrational fear sometimes when we go to those moments and something hits, if somebody like I don't even remember, a couple years ago now, my youngest, my littlest, she got into a tube of toothpaste, and you would have thought the entire, Fukushima core just fell apart in our house. I just absolutely melted down. And you don't want kids eating toothpaste, but it wasn't like it was a bottle of anthrax. It was toothpaste. And so not all of the fears are rational, though. Sometimes we have generational fears. And what do I mean? Those generational fears are the fears where it's just like the father. When he's having this comment with her, literally just go back a few chapters and you're going to see the exact same dynamic happening with Abraham because he's fearful of the beauty of Sarah. But we also see provisional fears too. That fear of if I don't do things, I'm not going to have enough. If I don't secure this, we're not going to be able to move forward. If I don't take care of the things, then we're out. And what you're noticing is that faith in God is not devoid of work. It's not devoid of moving things forward. It's not devoid, but it's a trust that along the way, even if the things you do fail, he doesn't fail. Even if the things you do don't seem to add up, he adds up. And that's the faith we're talking about. And that faith is always exposed in these seasons when we're starting to lose. We're starting to become unmoored. The famine hit, and that's when it's exposed. That's also when it grows. But here's the thing. Does it work? Does it work when we live in the fear and kind of not move fully into the faith? Well, let's take a look. In verse 12, it says this: Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. So that's how we know he was there for a good length of time. And the Lord blessed him. And the man became rich, and he gained more and more until he became very wealthy. And he had possessions of flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. Yep. Now the Philistines had stopped, and they filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father. And Abimelech, this is over the Philistines, says to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we." Now, I want to make sure I capture the strength of this. When he's saying go away, that's not like hey, it's probably best that we just, part ways, make it amicable. It's basically, if you don't leave, we're killing you. We've already filled in all the wells for water. We've already made sure that your flock is going to dry out soon, and potentially your family. The thing is, some areas of Canaan are lush, but most of them are pretty arid. In fact, not too dissimilar from what we're standing in right now. And so to fill a well up, wells take a lot of time to dig. To fill that up meant that you no longer have that water source for your flock. And so he's looking at all the wealth that he's built over this year. He's looking at all the things, and he's starting to feel like I'm finally arriving. I lost my dad, the famine hit, I'm now in a new land. They didn't kill me because of her, and I'm starting to gain wealth. I'm starting to make it work, and all of a sudden, right as those begins to, it just falls apart. And that's what tends to happen as we live in that season of fear. We're mixed between fear and faith. The Lord loves us too much to let us just keep going in fear. He will have you roll through that cul-de-sac until you get the lesson. Why? Because he loves you. He doesn't want you to put faith with anything else but trust in him. Or fear with anything else but trust in him. He wants you to follow him regardless of the circumstances around you. And so what's happening here is that because Isaac's living in the fear, you're noticing that sojourn time is taking a lot longer. He's a pilgrim for a lot longer than he thought he would be. He's thinking, I should be arrived. I should be there. I've finally figured it out. And then it all gets taken away. And here's the other thing. God is developing his faith. He's saying, hey, I'm bringing you through a land. I already gave you the promise. I already told you I'd be with you. Move by faith. For Melinda and I, when we had that latest moment with the kids, I remember we've got some kid cameras in the rooms just to kind of monitor as they're sleeping, and the kid camera picked up that incident with the toothpaste and Ruby, and I watched it. And as I watched it, I just began to be hit with the reality that as I amped up, I could see the actions of my kids. I couldn't see it when it was happening, because when it was happening, I was just, responding. But when I looked at it through the camera, I could see the responses of my kids and just how much fear it was producing. And it showed me clearer than anything else that our fear produces fear in the kids. These generational sins, that's how that transfers over. It's not like you're setting out to just have them fear all the things you fear, and they won't fear all the things you fear, but they'll fear some of the things, and they'll fear in the way that you fear. Because they're like a sponge soaking things up, and it hit me. I was like, I need to stop this. And the only way I'm going to stop it is not by protecting all the environments and making sure nothing ever happens and making sure I've got to live by faith. And faith always looks foolish when you're in fear. It just does. It looks foolish. And yet faith is the wisest thing we can do. It's what God has made us to do. It's what God has equipped us to do, to trust in him. Here's the big answer. Let's look with me in verse 23. It says, from there now, Isaac is going up to Beersheba. He's leaving the area. He's going to a totally new arid location that still doesn't solve the water problem. All the things he's worked for, gone. All the things he was fearing never came to be. And now he finds himself with his flocks and his family, and he's wondering, how in the world am I to deal with this? Now take a look, verse 24. And the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham, your father. Fear not, for I am with you. He's not just the God of the father, he's the God of Isaac. And he says, and I will bless you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake. He says, the line's still going. My plans have not been thwarted. Dug in wells, earth-filled wells, lack of water. I don't need any of that. I need your eyes on me. I need you to follow me. I need you to, by faith, trust in me. I need you to grow in faith and believe. In Flatiron Church, that's the answer we have before us. That is what God offers of himself. He doesn't offer the lack of resources never being on the table. He doesn't offer the pretty picture of here's A to Z. He simply says, trust in faith in me, and I will lead. Regardless of what you go through, regardless of the situations of life. And along the way, I'm going to change you so that the things that used to be true of your family are no longer true. The things that need to be true of your family are now true. And he's breaking down generational sins, and he's giving and increasing faith. But you and I have to respond. You and I can't just sit here, read the story, think, man, that's awesome for Isaac, and not respond. Verse 25, it says this, for he built an altar there, and he called upon the name of the Lord, and he pitched his tent there. He's saying, okay, right here, God, I don't know what you're going to do in Beersheba, but I'm on it. I'm here. I'm available. I'm ready. And he says, Isaac's servant's digging a well. He's like, okay, if this is where you're calling us, then we're going to trust by faith. Where are you needing to dig the well? Where are you needing to plant the tent? Where right now in this season of life, God's calling you to say, hey, all these things that you're fearful of, focus on me and start moving. I'm telling you right now, Flatiron, this response is so pivotal because it will change not just the course of you, but the course of everyone that comes after you. And some of you are thinking, well, I'm not married, don't have kids, what does it matter? Like, you're going to impact somebody's kid, especially you spend time in the church, engage with families, talk with people. That lineage is still going to carry on. There are people who impacted my life in significant ways that were outside my family. But we must choose to respond by faith, even as the fear encompasses the situation. I want to close with this, Hebrews 11, 8 and 9. It's penned years after. This is after Christ was on the scene, and it's talking about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And it says this in verse 8, it says, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he received as an inheritance. He had no idea what was going to happen. He was just called to go, and he was going to walk by faith. And so he went out not knowing where he was going. And by faith he lived in the land of promise as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him in the same promise. And I love that. This passage in Hebrews is talking about this household of faith, this lineage of faith. And he's saying Isaac had to go. He had to endure. He had to move forward. He couldn't rest on the faith of his father. His father taught him and trained him and grew him up. And he gave him the good and he gave him the bad. And Isaac had to move forward. And where are you today? Where are you? You're having to move forward. You've come out of something. Maybe something's been lost and now the famine of your life is hit. And the Lord is looking and saying, trust. Stop running to the ways you've previously done life. Stop running to the ways that you've elevated in fear and start living in faith. And by the way, that's never absent of the fear being around you. It's always at the same time where he's inviting you in. And he's inviting you to respond. And that's what I want us to do. Flatiron, I want us to respond this morning. For the first challenge, and really the one challenge is, where are you being kind of locked in those patterns of sin from family? You can call them generational sins, you can call them whatever you want, but they're patterns of sin. And God's inviting you to faith. Where are those for you? Where does that need to be confessed before him in prayer? Where does that need to be laid down at his feet and say, let these things no longer be true of me? Some of you just need to get a Connect card out right now and fill it out and say, you know what? I want to meet with a pastor, or I want to meet with a life group leader, or I want to meet with a team, because you've just kind of been living on the shadows on the sidelines and you just need to get in. You're very rarely is the Lord going to just do the work and let you stay isolated. In fact, I've never heard of that. He's often going to use this community of believers and people that have similar or dissimilar bents to you. He's going to use you guys to point back to Jesus. But right now, where is that for you? Or where is it for you where you're coming at this and you're like, I don't know Jesus yet. And I'm trying to live not in fear. And I'm telling you right now, if you don't have Jesus, then there's no other path but fear. Because there's no one over it. There's no one walking through it with you. You're on your own. And so, fathers, today, I want to invite you, especially as you're looking at lineage, especially as you're looking at what's the legacy I'm going to leave, or man, I've screwed this thing up so bad. Is there even a path forward? Isaac screwed it up pretty bad when he said, hey, not my wife. Like, not a good moment. Imagine there was some counseling that came after that at some point. And yet, the Lord used that lineage for the promise, and that promise is Jesus. That's the blessing to all nations. It's him. And so I want us to pray so that we can respond to him, both for those who need to meet Jesus and those who know them. Father, I thank you for today's message. I thank you for your word. It's hitting me even as I think about my family and the lineage you've given me from those I came and stewarding the kids that you've given. Lord, I pray for the fathers today that they would walk in faith and not fear. That they would begin to lay down the things that have gripped their hearts, that they saw from their parents. And they begin to push in and trust and move in their own journey with you. And Lord, I want to address the Christian here who's just having difficulty trusting you. The fear is all encompassing, and if they're honest, it's easier to run to it. Lord, I pray right now, by your grace, you would give them faith right now for the season ahead. For those who don't know you or are far from you, who are opposed to you, right now I pray, Lord, that they would see in themselves their true need for you. That they would, by faith and through grace, trust you as the King of Kings who came onto this earth to die the death that we deserve, who rose again after 3 days of being buried in a tomb because death couldn't keep you, who is now seated in the heavenlies, ruling and reigning. Lord, I pray that they would trust you. They would begin by faith to not live in response by fear, but begin to walk without seeing, but knowing that you see clearly and trusting that. And Lord, for each, I pray that we would be so bold as to confess that need before you today. Lord, change the culture of our church that we might be men and women who follow fiercely in faith. And I ask this, Jesus, in your name. Amen.